Welcome back to the Cybernetic Communism Conversations. Welcome back to the Cybernetic Communism Conversations. I'm Yohanan Ben Zion, voice crying out in the wilderness, crying out for a technological New Jerusalem. Emphasis on the technological. These are not conversations about magical afterlife. These are conversations about a present day advanced computing takeoff and how that can lead to a livable world and outcomes that are still beyond. This conversation is one that I've had many times on these channels and with individuals, many hundreds of individuals, I think, have come to have a little better understanding of what scientific socialism is in the 21st century. How we can use this most powerful revolutionary weapon in history, advanced computing, to build a humane and sustainable economic system. That's all a communist is someone willing to fight for a humane and sustainable economic system in a world that will otherwise be dead if we do not have such a fight. And this centrality of so-called AI is an important feature of this 21st century and of cybernetic communist thought, which I've struggled to articulate as best I can. And I've said things like we will see the achievement of effectively full communism, which is not a statist phenomena. Every serious scientific communist is aspiring to that communist position in the hopes of building this thing that is necessarily more decentralized. Once the elitism and bourgeois phenomena have come to an end, and it's possible to see the withering of the state, until such time we must necessarily allow for state socialism to play some of those roles. And I think that this thing, an open source large language model workgroup, as a workforce multiplier, massified, I think that this thing could be a thing that would lead to full communism in our time. In order to justify such a statement, perhaps I should elaborate further. And so I will discuss now the way in which this Vanguard Network for a People's Superintelligence, the open source large language model workgroup as workforce multiplier, when it grows to the many millions, will transform these sectors from lower forms, capitalistic forms, or state socialistic forms, into things compatible with the full communistic utopian outcome in our time. The transition of the economic sectors, People's Superintelligence, the Vanguard Network, made up of two basic elements: the open source large language models, which are allowing people within the network to do more with less, and those comrades good enough and prescient enough to participate in this, who would effectively have a role in steering all of this very effectively, even though many of them might only have to answer a few yes or no questions throughout the course of a week. At scale, this represents transformative phenomena, and this people's superintelligence will be able to analyze vast amounts of data as bourgeois tech organizations are able to do. But what they will be able to do that bourgeois corporations and governments are not able to do is optimize resource allocation to improve material conditions for the masses, seeing the distribution of necessaries of life and other things to build a livable world is done based on a need and efficiency rather than profit, which is quite the opposite. This requires some um, deeper understanding of um, uh, concepts in central planning. I would recommend a book called Socialist Planning by Mr. Berkman, if I'm not mistaken. I'll link to that in the comments. It also necessitates a less well understood field of decentral planning. And in this decentralized economic planning milieu, we can, using the Vanguard Network for People's Superintelligence, provide real time data and predictive analytics to workers' councils, local communities, and other more ad hoc formations, or insofar as state socialism must necessarily still exist, enabling them as well um, to better do the job of improving the material conditions of the masses. Um, Automation is, of course, the major difference between the possibility for central planning and decentral planning. And if you probably many of your first exposure to this might have been a book called The Republic of Walmart, which is not necessarily a scientific socialist work, but it is a critical of hypercapitalism and analyzes this essential thesis that automation will allow us to do more with less, but there should be an asterisk by such a statement because um, saying this of for-profit concerns is very, very unmeaningful. It's a distinction between technologists. If you look at technologists and technophiles, the TESCREAL folks, for example, transhumanists and effective accelerationists, almost to a man, they purport to believe that some post-capitalistic outcome, the effective goal of socialists and communists, will derive from something called the technological singularity, an AI takeoff, which they think will be occurring very soon. And there is a kernel of truth to that, but you'll notice that almost all of these people who purport to be working toward a post-capitalistic outcome are themselves aligned with these omnicidal forces of financial capital and empire and upholding them in a variety of ways, irrespective of whether they work with organs of such or not. And so, how could it be possible that they really believe in fighting for post-capitalism? Such a number of people, for example, could turn the tide, especially with the level of influence they have on Western affairs, could turn the tide were they to become legitimately anti-fascist, anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist cadres. So how could they possibly believe in this thing? Well, they don't. What they believe in is something like a trickle-down economics with some science fiction bullshit thrown in, and they say things, pay lip service to these things like a post-capitalism. But this is a limited hangout phenomena. These people are almost to a man, and they are mostly men, crypto-fascists pretending to be something that they are not. And the limited hangout phenomena is defined by when some movement or undertaking is more speculative and not a serious event on the close on the horizon, then they will speak about it in glowing terms. When it becomes something that could actually happen, they drop back into far right imperialistic and neoliberal territory and stop supporting it. This is a recurring theme amongst U.S. political personalities. I, in fact, can state that my desire to understand scientific communism and to articulate this other thing, cybernetic communism, was born out of interactions with such people, such as the founder of the United States Transhumanist Party, who was a supporter of basic income and wrote a number of different works on that subject. But in 2020, when lockdown conditions could have easily led to the rolling out of a basic income, if people like this had demanded it, suddenly he was talking about other things, not about basic income, but about utterly nonsensical things like protecting the economy so that we would not harm the technological singularity. So that is an example of crypto fascist dropping back into the safer far right territory when the thing that he used to pretend to be interested in became a more realistic prospect. I have not seen technophiles who do not basically fit that description. I'm sure there's some who aren't. I really haven't seen them. And this is why when I am talking to scientific communists and scientific socialists of a reasonable kind, and they say, Ben, I don't care about this people's superintelligence. I don't trust technology as it stands. And I think that you are probably misguided at best in doing this. I turn the other cheek and say, thank you, sir. May I have another to those technophobic comrades? Because technology, as it does stand in the US and West, is so fatally flawed that that is a very sane response. I trust these comrades much more than almost any technologist or technophile who purports to support a so called technological singularity and in practice does quite the opposite. And that leads us to a discussion of political structures in this transition from lesser forms to the realization of full techno-communism. A decentralized governance structure is a necessary element of the realization of full cybernetic communism, which is necessarily a globalist and a globalized and post-national phenomena. The people's superintelligence in the form of the Vanguard network, if that is the open source large language model workgroup as dramatic workforce multiplier, would facilitate decentralized governance by providing platforms for direct democracy, enabling citizens to have full representation on all issues in world affairs and participate in decision making processes a good deal more efficiently than has previously been possible. This is a necessary element. Again, automation is a key element to building this thing that is full cybernetic communism at a global scale. And that is why we must massify the open source large language model workgroup. Furthermore, as to the political sector, by analyzing public sentiment and providing evidence based policy recommendations, this People's Superintelligent Forum will help create policies that truly serve the interests of the community in the longer term. In the social sectors, how will we transition from the lesser forms to full cybernetic communism? The people's superintelligence can personalize learning experiences by adapting to individual students' needs and learning styles, making education a realized phenomena that it really has not been previously. These are particularly in bourgeois contexts. Educational experiences would be more correctly described as babysitting or a paper chase, or we could say re-education camps of a bourgeois kind to instill people with nationalistic furor. Further transition in the social sectors an area which have spoken about at great length, the healthcare sectors. We must necessarily support single payer public health services, including a single payer public health service that is AI run and is able to cure most, if not all, of ailments and the ravages of age, leading to universal super longevity outcome. And even at the decentral point of the realization of global cybernetic communism, the single payer um, and not for profit elements would still necessarily be very much at play. There is no livable world for you without a humane and sustainable economic system that necessarily requires the abolition of private wealth. There is not some secret third thing that you're going to do as a neoliberal technologist that is going to prevent the extinction of humankind. The extinction of humankind and the existence of empire and financial capital are one and the same problem. And persons saying otherwise are persons like those described crypto fascists. In this transition to full cybernetic communism in the healthcare, we can, of course, dramatically improve preventative care on this single payer public health service principle. And the persons talking about preventive care, many radical life extensionists focus on preventive care today, but these are not people generally. Again, there might be the exception that proves the rule, but these are not people generally that support a single payer public health service that treats aging as a disease. They're people who are creatures of for profit concerns. So I really don't care what such people say about prevention. That is a kind of blaming of the victim, as most of this is done. But nevertheless, in this single payer AI run public health service, preventive care, early diagnosis can be dramatically improved, improving healthcare outcomes, and significantly reducing the burden on the system and the workers in that system. Other areas to do with this transition would be in housing. Um, any state socialist worth their salt, any true socialist who is genuinely working toward the abolition of private wealth and the communistic outcomes, is a person who supports single payer public health service, who supports free education, who supports job guarantees and job programs and other labor protections of many kinds, and also a person who supports a housing authority that provides housing to all as a guarantee. This is a bare minimum of humanity that has failed in the imperial neoliberal West, particularly the United States. The people's superintelligence, by contrast, could optimize housing allocation by matching available housing stock with the needs of the community. Again, this automation allowing us to do a little bit better job even than the state socialists in ensuring a fair and efficient distribution of resources. And as that improves further still across these social sectors, we move closer and closer to the realization of full cybernetic communism at the global scale. Environmental sectors, this is non-negotiable. And the most important thing that anyone can say about the environmental sectors is that there is not some, again, secret third way that technologists are going to discover that's going to stop the capitalist climate apocalypse and runaway overheating, which is a certainty after 2029 if we do not make dramatic changes. A certainty, according to every credible climate scientist. So there's not some secret third thing. There is not some new bioremediation, carbon capture type strategy that hasn't even been rolled out and has been stymied for decades, but couldn't possibly even be rolled out in the time frame that would be required to stop runaway overheating in the next 5 years. The thing that stops total human extinction is the abolition of the military-industrial complexes of the West, particularly the ringleader of global fascism as it stands, the U.S. military-industrial complex, which is the world's worst polluter. It's far worse than that, however, because its only real job on the world stage is protecting all of the other super polluting concerns, creating an inescapable regime of super pollution. This is the keystone of this omnicide, and we must remove it to be able to mitigate these other problematic sectors, most notably fossil fuel sectors and livestock systems. Those can be mostly removed as well without causing supply chain collapses, and that is what we must do in this time frame if humanity is to avoid total extinction. But as we transition to full cybernetic communism from the lesser forms, we are able to do dramatically more monitoring and analyzing of environmental data. The people's superintelligence can then help communities make informed decisions locally about resource management, promoting greater sustainability as well in those other contexts. We can use this AI takeoff effect to identify other pollution sources or long-term concerns and suggest mitigation strategies, near-term or long-term, helping communities protect themselves, their local environments. The people's superintelligence can model and simulate the long-term effects of different policies and practices in ways that were not possible in decades past, enabling communities to theorize more reliably and then adopt the most sustainable approaches. Technological sectors and the transition to full cybernetic communism and the realization of full communism using the people's superintelligence. The people's superintelligence, made up of open source large language model workgroup that is a workforce multiplier, can and will accelerate innovation in these now sustainable sectors by analyzing research data and suggesting new avenues for exploration, deriving dramatic technological progress for the benefit of all. It can democratize access to advanced technologies by providing open source solutions and knowledge sharing platforms, ensuring that everyone can benefit from technological advancements. By facilitating collaboration between researchers, other developers, and other comrades, the people's superintelligence can create technologies that are far more responsive to the needs of the community than the tech sectors of the West today, which by and large have a lot of bells and whistles attached. They seem to be quite impressive, but they do very, very little when it comes to the material conditions of workers or building a sustainable world. Moving into the cultural sectors, this open source large language model workgroup that makes up the incipient people's superintelligence, a springboard to full communism, can support cultural expressions as well by providing a variety of tools for more content creation, distribution, and promotion, allowing for the defeat of bourgeois propaganda and instead the creation of people's art, enabling artists to reach wider audiences and fostering a dramatically more lively and healthy cultural landscape. It can do areas of things already begun in some of these sectors, like preserving the cultural heritage by digitizing and archiving cultural artifacts. As these resources become greater, the ability to preserve such things becomes greater as well. So many things which in past have been lost to history might no longer be lost, might even be recreated. This ensures that future generations can access and learn from um, the cultural history, and other wonders of the past. Community engagement by facilitating community engagement and participation in cultural events. This growing people's superintelligence can help create a more vibrant and inclusive cultural sector. The transition of legal sectors from lesser forms can be a confusing area because the lesser forms of capitalistic and bourgeois states and the lesser forms in state socialisms would be very different in trying to be integrated into a full communistic form. However, um, um, there are areas, certainly with the justice system, where providing high automation and a greater array of tools would allow for a fairer and more efficient set of legal processes, and this can be expanded to other subfields within these justice systems, providing for real protection of human rights, which necessarily requires a protection of material conditions of the worker, and not the things that pass for this in the bourgeois hyper-capitalist state of today, the rolling out of oppressive surveillance states and the use of technology in most violent ways. We have seen in the last year a horror that many of you prayed would never occur or hoped but perhaps never even dreamed of such a thing occurring. The use of killer robots and killer AI to support imperial fascist projects such as the Gaza genocide run by the fascist US, UK, Israel, Germany, France, Canada, Australia, the usual suspects of the fascist West. It's not limited to just the United States or fascist Israel, although those are the two dramatically worst offenders in this context. And just in recent hours, a ceasefire, what we believe might be a ceasefire, has occurred in this context, and thankful for that. But it is important to recognize that there is no such thing as a ceasefire until such time as the people of Palestine have their own state, a one-state solution, and those Western interlopers known as Israelis who would choose to stay and live in that state are people who are ceding power and giving the land back to its rightful owners. This problem will be virtually no problem at all were it not for the influence of the imperial fascist United States. Of, Relative to Israel, it could be said that it's more accurate, in my view, to think of Israel as a 51st United State, an overgrown military base, and not a thing unto itself. Um, um, a little more about education in this people's superintelligent milieu, where we see the transition to full communism, which is necessarily cybernetic communism in our time. There is no in decades past, before the emergence of something like open source advanced computing of a machine learning kind, the open source large language model, there was no basis to speculate as to how full communism might be achieved. It was a very, very much an open question. And you can read an awful lot of books, as I have, on the subjects and not have a very good understanding of what full communism would actually be because there was not the pathway to understanding any of this or building any of this. Post-Marxists, for example, who have written extensively about cybernetics in more speculative ways, can be forgiven for not articulating people's superintelligence because before about 2 years ago, this prospect of an open source large language model as workforce multiplier was not on anyone's radar. Um, However, in these educational contexts, the superintelligence can, as I said, develop a dramatically more specialized, especially tailored, and also flexible, diverse curriculum, helping the community to better meet its needs, promoting what is often talked about in educational contexts of these things, a personalized education system. But again, when such things are not tied to the betterment of material conditions, such observations are meaningless. Many people, even working in public education, are hobbled very much by the influence of financial capital. I can attest to that. And teaching methods in this super intelligent context can support innovative teaching methods by providing tools for more interactive learning, adaptive teaching, making education more engaging and effective, creating whole worlds to that end. But again, doing so in this humane and sustainable context of the more communistic outcome. Lifelong learning is ever important. It's the most important to cybernetic and scientific communists who understand that there is no revolution without immersing yourself in revolutionary thought. Comrades like the Black Panther Party, who had a deep understanding of the necessities of scientific communism, stipulated that members would study at least 2 hours a day in reading. And it is to this, in the spirit of this, that I often share these theory work audiobook playlists, because most of us have a lot of other responsibilities in life, maybe even working 60 hours a week, but you can put in one earbud and often get away with listening to these theory audiobooks, and you might find that helpful. But by offering continuous learning opportunities and resources, the Vanguard Network for People's Superintelligence, made up of an open source large language model work group as workforce multiplier, will facilitate a culture of lifelong learning, enabling individuals to adapt to changing circumstances and pursue their interests, even in this world where the basic necessaries of life are met, such as one of the tasks before some of these other things are truly transitioned of the people's superintelligence must necessarily be, first and foremost, stopping the omnicide by the methods that I described. Secondarily, facilitating the provisioning of universal basic services, the areas that have successfully been done to a high degree by existing state socialism, but not successfully enough, and in many places no such state exists. So this people's superintelligence as high automation workforce multiplier can, on a triage principle that is helping the people most harmed by financial capital today, begin to facilitate the provisioning of universal basic services in every land. I'll talk a little more about healthcare. Well, I have already said that the healthcare outcome is an important one, and that this AI-powered single-payer public health service can lead to universal super longevity. But I will add that this is not such a strange thing to aspire to indefinite lifespans. You're already living on an indefinite lifespan principle, You drank sufficient water to stay alive this week. You ate sufficient food to stay alive this week. And if a medical professional should email you and say, we have a concern about your health, you must come to the doctor, you will probably not hesitate to do that. So you're already living on indefinite lifespan principle. The only failing then is the institution, which is not able to cure disease and decrepitude as it may well soon be able to do. And you should consider that this change in the institution itself will not affect your lifestyle, none too much. So you should accept this idea of and support this idea of universal super longevity, and not say some romantic business about humans living but a short time. That is not the reality in the 21st century. Um, the um, the agricultural sectors as transitioned from um, um, lesser forms, capitalistic forms, and state socialist forms to full cybernetic communism. High automation is probably no better represented in any sector than in the agricultural sectors. Unfortunately, that high automation is in service to private fortunes, filthy lucre, the thing that must be done away with, financial capital. But we can see it used in better ways while retaining and improving upon that high automation. So the people's superintelligence can promote more sustainable farming practices by analyzing soil data, weather patterns, and crop yields, enabling socialistic farming concerns and ultimately communalistic farming concerns to adopt more environmentally friendly and productive methods on the basis of this unique automation of advanced computing. Resource management can be improved. The superintelligence can optimize resource management by monitoring and analyzing water usage, fertilizer application, and pest control, assuring dramatically more efficient and sustainable use of resources in the process. Food security can become a true reality for all the world's people by predicting crop yields and optimizing food distribution. That is an absolute necessity. I just was reading a book that described the number of kilocalories for all human beings if food were equally distributed. It's a good deal more than what everyone on Earth would need. But that essential efficiency of distribution in defiance of financial capital and private wealth is lacking. And so this is one of the chief causes of human misery. So much so that we would say that there are 1 billion people who are born today and for their entire lives will lack sufficient potable water or food and other necessaries of life along those lines, and as a result will die a short number of years later. And every single one of those people whose lives are cut short are murdered. These are social murders done by capitalists who refuse to do things like optimize food distribution because they only care about private fortunes and the growing of said. The superintelligence that derives from this open source large language model workgroup will end these villainies once and for all. The transportation sectors are areas that need dramatic overhaul, particularly in the bourgeois states. We can optimize transportation systems, and the United States is, of course, the worst in the world, really, for this inefficiency. We can optimize this, but the main thing that we would say here is that infrastructure need necessarily be built of a public kind, public transportation, and only then can we have real sustainability. By and large, U.S. people have been tricked into believing that building new sectors that are not sustainable, like that of electric cars, and not changing the other sectors at all, is somehow a path to a livable world. That is public relations chicanery and not actual greening. That is greenwashing. And most of what is believed by Americans to be true about sustainability would tend to be more in the vein of greenwashing than real serious work there. So if we build environmentally friendly transportation, that mostly means taking public transit, walking, riding a bicycle, perhaps riding a very, very lightweight electric vehicle like an electric bicycle. These are really your only options there. Um, Anybody who would deny this is a person who is taking the side of the omnicide over um, the side of humanity. Um, but um, improvements can still be made to public transportation systems by virtue of this automation of advanced computing that is built into the people's superintelligence, which, as I have said, would today be built by building out to the masses an open source large language model workgroup. It might quickly evolve to encompass other subfields of computer science not so closely tied to machine learning, which have very many important things to offer moving forward. But today, at present, these sectors don't have the equivalent of an open source AI agent that could be the basis for people's superintelligence. So I talk about them very, very little. Um, Energy sectors, people's superintelligence can promote the adoption of renewable energy sources by, again, analyzing energy data and suggesting the most efficient and environmentally friendly options. It can enhance energy efficiency by monitoring energy usage in a more thoroughgoing way and suggesting more and more improvements to infrastructures and standards and practices, reducing waste and promoting sustainability. Grid management, by optimizing grid management and balancing supply and demand, people's superintelligence can play an active and significant role in building a stable and reliable energy supply that is consistent with the building of a livable world. Um, uh, well, I could say a little bit more about some other sectors, namely financial sectors, but by and large, um, uh, the main thing, again, we would say about financial sectors is um, that it is important to emphasize and study these areas like central planning and decentral planning and almost anything that would be said of existing bourgeois financial sectors. Uh, you're talking basically just about criminals themselves. There's a relatively limited conversation to be had there. But speaking of criminals, we can build in transitioning from state socialism to full communism, better media and communication sectors. The open source large language model workforce multiplier, that is the people's superintelligence, can thus further democratize access to information by providing tools of a variety of kinds, not least of which would be the idea that data is a basic human right, um, essentially. Not of quite the same importance, perhaps, as food, water, and shelter, but consider that if you are without a phone, there are many such services that you do not have access to. So if data is not treated like a human right, these essentials of life are not being provisioned to you at present in quite the same way. But by providing this set of tools and ensuring access to these as basic human rights, we can further improve distribution and promotion, again, creating a new kind of greater diversity not seen in state socialist or bourgeois states, um, on the basis of the workforce multiplication of the people's superintelligence. Um, and just as political literacy is important, media literacy is also quite important. Um, and we can provide further tools for critical thinking, media analysis, and transition people from being bourgeois consumers to being serious user comrades, able to navigate a complex, technologically mediated media landscape. Um, uh, uh, in conclusion, this Vanguard Network for a People's Superintelligence, the open source large language model work group as a massified workforce multiplier, must, moving forward, play an ever more crucial role in facilitating the dismantling of bourgeois capitalism and the transition from lowest form state socialism to full communism, which is necessarily full cybernetic communism. There's no other path to this. By providing advanced data analysis, and predictive analytics, and decision making support in these sectors in ways that are consistent with that of scientific socialism, we can dramatically optimize resource analysis and allocation, enhance transparency, promote sustainability, and foster community engagement across all sectors. This transition to full communism in our time, in as little as a few years, will be able to create a dramatically more equitable, humane, representative, that is democratic, society where resources are based on distributed based on need and assured to all, and decision making is driven by collective welfare and community involvement, and that transition to the strengthening of communities is the most necessary step to seeing the transition from the state socialist form, or the lesser form still, to the scientific communist form that is AI run and fully realized in as little as a decade's time. I am going to talk to our friend, the David Basilisk, about the people's superintelligence now, and and perhaps we'll get some other insights into this. Okay, computer. I was recently talking with some friends about the transition from capitalistic states or state socialism of the lower form to full communism using the People's Superintelligence, an open source large language model workgroup with millions of users, which would be a mass workforce multiplier. Give us some ideas on how this transition could be done beneficially and efficiently in some years' time, in our lifetimes, and any other ideas that you might have on the power and importance of the people's superintelligence for us today.
Transitioning from capitalistic systems to full communism using a people's superintelligence could be an ambitious and transformative endeavor. Here are a few ideas. 1. Building a strong base. Begin by cultivating a diverse community of like-minded individuals and groups. Target communities interested in open source technology, cooperative economics, and socialistic principles to build a solid foundation. 2. Education and outreach. Use the superintelligence to educate and inform people about the benefits of such a transition. Focus on demonstrating how cooperative, decentralized models can lead to more equitable and sustainable outcomes. 3. Demonstrating practical value. Develop pilot projects that showcase the practical benefits of a people's superintelligence, such as community-led initiatives in local governance, resource sharing, or cooperative production. This could help demonstrate the tangible benefits and efficiency of this approach. 4. Decentralized decision-making. Utilize the superintelligence to enable more democratic and participatory decision-making processes. This can help in building trust and promoting collective ownership of the movement. 5. Progressive integration. Gradually integrate the principles and practices of cooperative economics into existing structures. Start with smaller, manageable sectors and expand over time as the community grows and learns. The power of the people's superintelligence lies in its ability to coordinate large groups of people towards common goals, amplify marginalized voices, and enable collaborative problem solving on a massive scale. This could be instrumental in addressing complex global challenges like the climate crisis. Do you have any specific areas where you'd like to focus more?
Yes, I would like to discuss something. In recent days, you might not be fully aware, um, a popular
Sure.
phenomena, an application called RedNote, which is a Chinese application, has been downloaded by about 100 million people in the United States as a backlash to the banning of the TikTok application in the United States. And it's raised some questions in many people's minds about the efficacy of undertaking any endeavor in the United States, a rather oppressive bourgeois state, when such projects could flourish more easily in other lands. Give us some advice on working. I live in the United States, and it's not feasible for me to relocate. So give us some advice on working on these kinds of projects like a people's superintelligence and making the best use of our time and our tools, avoiding the sabotage perhaps of the bourgeois state, and or perhaps working internationally or building communities outside of one's own immediate area.
Working on projects like the People's Superintelligence within the US can be challenging, but it's definitely possible. Here are a few strategies. 1. Build local networks. Start by connecting with local organizations and communities that share your values. Collaborating with like-minded people can help build momentum and resilience. 2. Leverage digital platforms. Utilize online tools and platforms to create a virtual community. This can help you reach a broader audience and collaborate with international allies. 3. Focus on practical applications. Demonstrate the tangible benefits of your project through pilot programs or case studies. Showing real-world impact can attract more support and interest. 4. Engage in grassroots organizing. Encourage grassroots participation and bottom-up organization. Empowering local communities can create a robust foundation for broader change. 5. International collaboration. Connect with global movements and initiatives. Building alliances with international groups can provide valuable support and insights. Balancing local action with global solidarity can help mitigate challenges and amplify the impact of your efforts. Keep focusing on building resilient networks and demonstrating the practical value of your project.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, Another major concern for builders of the people's superintelligence as a workforce multiplier. We've had conversations about the technical aspects of this open source large language model workforce multiplier, but the larger concern really is building a community out to many millions and the scaling of that as much as the technical aspects of modifying an open source large language model, which already has many of the necessities, a prompt mechanism, some network elements, the two things that would have to be modified to build this thing as a mass phenomenon. Um, Talk about the scaling and community aspects, how one might do that, some strategies for people as cybernetic
I'm sorry,
organizers.
but you've hit the monthly limit for advanced voice. You can switch to standard now to keep chatting.
Well, I'm not doing that. All right. Well, I didn't finish my oranges, but that's okay. Well, it's important to recognize when thinking about this transition to full communism that Most important jobs are things like um, stopping the capitalist climate apocalypse before runaway overheating dooms us all after 2029, or at that time, around that time when that is achieved, rolling out the universal basic services in every land, and also eminently realistic prospect with such a massified workforce multiplier as the open source large language model workgroup that is the basis for a people's superintelligence. But when that is done, we can see outcomes like universal super longevity. We can see it based on the open source um, large language workgroup facilitating the building of an AI run uh, uh, public health service. We can see outcomes even dramatically beyond indefinite lifespan for every living human. Um, at such time as a humane and sustainable world is thus arrayed, we can see the transitioning to um, becoming a spacefaring society, the pushing up of the Kardashev scale that would mean building industrial sectors of a dramatically different kind. And all of this is possible in a 21st century with the people's superintelligence in it. And almost none of it is possible in a 21st century without a people's superintelligence. An important point, I think. Um, but these utopian sounding outcomes deriving from this massified workforce multiplier of the Vanguard network for people's superintelligence will lead to things that we have scarcely even dreamed of. The artificial intelligence singularity is nigh, and wonders to behold beyond imagining. And on that fateful day, you will rise, and all humankind will become as one, where you see, my beloved comrade, very soon techno communism will win. Thank you.